The desert sun had baked the forward operating base in eastern Afghanistan into a concrete oven. Temperatures pushed past 110 degrees, and the air tasted of dust, diesel, and sweat. Nearly 1,040 American soldiers, Marines, and Afghan National Army troops had gathered in a loose semicircle around a makeshift stage built from plywood and shipping pallets. It was meant to be a morale event, a rare break from the relentless cycle of patrols, firefights, and the ever-present threat of improvised explosive devices. The rumor spreading through the ranks was that a Navy SEAL, a living legend from the teams, had volunteered to conduct a close combat demonstration. Men who had not smiled in weeks were actually laughing, pushing each other forward to get a better view. The SEAL's name was Chief Mitch Campbell. He was 6 feet 3 inches of coiled muscle, with a shaved head and a neck thicker than most men's thighs. He had more combat deployments than years. Some of the young privates had been out of high school. His reputation preceded him, 22 confirmed kills to silver stars, and a habit of speaking about himself in the third person when he wanted to intimidate someone. He thrived on the energy of a crowd, and today, with over 1,000 pairs of eyes on him, he felt invincible. He paced the stage in his tan t-shirt and cargo pants, no body armor, no helmet, just a pair of wraparound sunglasses and a cocky grin that said he had already won whatever game was about to be played. He called for volunteers. "I need someone from the audience," he boomed, his voice carrying across the FOB without a microphone. "Any soldier, any Marine. I want to show you how a SEAL controls a threat up close," the crowd roared. Hands shot up, but Campbell was selective. He didn't want a fellow operator who might actually know a thing or two. He wanted someone who looked tough but manageable, someone who would make him look good. His eyes landed on a young woman standing near the front of the formation. She was a staff sergeant in the Army, a military intelligence analyst named Clara Vasquez. She was 5 feet 5 inches tall, wiry, with dark hair pulled into a tight bun and calm brown eyes that had seen more than her age suggested. She was not a combat instructor. She was not a martial artist. But she had spent the last 10 months in a watchtower, tracking insurgent movements via drone feeds, and she had learned something crucial about violence. It was not about size or strength. It was about geometry, timing, and the complete absence of hesitation. Campbell pointed at her. "You, little lady, come on up." The crowd chuckled. Clara did not smile. She unclipped her rifle, handed it to the soldier next to her, and walked onto the stage with the unhurried gait of someone who had nothing to prove. Campbell sized her up, looked her over, and then decided to have some fun. He turned to the 1,000-plus troops and said, loud enough for every single one of them to hear, "I'm a Navy SEAL, remember that. I'm about to show you what happens when someone tries to take a weapon from a real warrior." He held up a rubber training knife, the kind used for force-on-force drills. Then he looked directly at Clara, his eyes cold and amused. "Your job is to try to take this knife from me. My job is to make sure you go to sleep in front of all your friends." The crowd went quiet. A few of the senior NCOs exchanged uneasy glances. They had seen this kind of thing before, a special operations guy using a lower-ranking soldier as a prop to stroke his own ego. But no one spoke up. Campbell was a SEAL, and on that base, SEALs walked on water. Clara stood across from him, her hands loose at her sides, her breathing steady. She had studied him during his little speech. He stood with his weight slightly forward, his knife hand constantly twitching, his eyes darting to the crowd every few seconds to check for reactions. He was performing, not preparing. That was her first clue. A real predator does not look for applause. Campbell circled her slowly, the rubber knife glinting under the harsh sun. "You scared?" he asked, loud enough for the audience. Clara did not answer. She just tracked his movement with her eyes, her head barely turning. He took that as fear, as submission. He decided to make the lesson even more memorable. "I want everyone to watch closely," he announced, turning his head toward the troops for just a split second. "This is what happens when a SEAL decides to end a fight. 3 seconds. Maybe 4. He looked back at Clara, grinned, and said, "Don't worry, sweetheart. I won't break anything important." That word sweetheart landed like a slap. Clara had not climbed out of poverty in the Bronx, had not survived basic training, had not earned her stripes as the only woman in her intelligence section to be called sweetheart by anyone. But she did not get angry. Anger slows you down. Instead, she felt something colder, clarity. She remembered a lesson her grandfather had taught her when she was 12 years old. after a boy twice her size had tried to steal her backpack. "He's bigger than you," her grandfather had said, an old Korean War medic with gnarled hands. "So don't fight his strength. Fight his balance. A man on one foot is just a tall baby." Clara had never forgotten that. She had practiced it on playgrounds, in judo classes, and later, in close-quarters combat training that the Army required every intelligent soldier to take. The principle was simple: the human body is a tower. Knock out one of the foundation stones, and the whole thing collapses. Campbell made his move. He lunged forward with the knife, a fast, theatrical thrust aimed at her midsection. It was a showman's attack, meant to look dangerous, but actually leave him plenty of room to recover. He expected her to step back, to flinch, to try to grab his wrist. That was what everyone did. That was what he had trained to counter. But Clara did not step back. She stepped in. She dropped her center of gravity by 6 inches, pivoted on her left foot, and shot her right hand down to his leading ankle. It was not a grab. It was a hook, her fingers digging into the soft spot just above his heel. At the same time, her left shoulder drove into his knee from the outside. The physics were merciless. Campbell's forward momentum, combined with the sudden redirection of his lower leg, turned his knee into a hinge, swinging the wrong way. His foot slid forward. His upper body stayed behind. For a fraction of a second, he was suspended horizontally. Like a man who had just stepped on a banana peel in slow motion, the fall took less than half a second. But to the 1,040 troops watching, it felt like an eternity. Campbell's eyes went wide behind his sunglasses. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He was a Navy SEAL, a man who had survived ambushes, grenade blasts, and a helicopter crash. None of that mattered now. His center of gravity had been stolen, and his body was simply obeying the laws of motion. His back hit the plywood stage with a hollow thud that echoed across the fob. The rubber knife flew from his hand, skittering across the deck and disappearing into the crowd. His legs kicked once, twice, and then went still. The air rushed out of his lungs in a single, embarrassing whoosh. And there he lay, flat on his back, staring up at the white-hot sky, completely and utterly defeated. Clara did not celebrate. She did not smirk. She did not say a single word. She simply straightened her t-shirt, turned her back on the fallen SEAL, and walked to the edge of the stage. She picked up her rifle from the soldier who had been holding it, slung it over her shoulder, and began walking back toward the watchtower where her shift was about to start. The silence lasted another 2 seconds. Then the crowd erupted. Not just clapping, roaring. Soldiers were screaming, slapping their knees, hugging each other. A Marine gunnery sergeant with 20 years of service was bent over, crying with laughter. A young private first class kept shouting, "Did you see that? Did you see what she did?" The sound was so loud that soldiers from the other side of the base came running, thinking there had been an attack. In a way, there had been. An attack on the unspoken rule that said SEALs were unbeatable. That rank and reputation mattered more than skill. That a 5'5" intelligence analyst could not possibly embarrass a decorated warrior in front of an entire battalion. Campbell stayed on the ground for a full 10 seconds. His pride was wounded far worse than his body. He finally rolled to his side, got to his knees, and stood up slowly, checking to make sure nothing was broken. His knee ached, and his lower back would hurt for a week, but the real damage was to his aura of invincibility. He looked around, expecting someone to help him save face. But no one came. The troops were too busy celebrating the woman who had just done the impossible. Campbell muttered something under his breath, picked up his sunglasses from where they had fallen, and walked off the stage with none of the swagger he had arrived with. A lieutenant who had been recording the whole thing on his phone immediately uploaded the video to a private military forum. Within hours, it would be seen by thousands of service members across Afghanistan. Back in the watchtower, Clara Vasquez sat down in front of her drone feed and resumed tracking a suspected Taliban commander near the village of Shkin. Her hands were steady on the joystick. Her face was expressionless. Her shift partner, a specialist named Davis, kept staring at her with his mouth open. "Clara," he finally said, "you just put a SEAL on his ass in front of God and everybody." Clara did not look away from the screen. "He left himself open," she said. "Anyone could have done it." Davis laughed so hard he snorted. No, they couldn't have. I've seen that move in a dozen training videos, and I've never seen anyone actually pull it off against a resisting opponent. You didn't just beat him. You erased him. Clara shrugged. She had no interest in fame or reputation. She was interested in one thing only: getting every soldier on that base home alive. Her job was to spot threats before they materialized, to warn patrols about IEDs and ambushes, to be the eyes in the sky that kept the bad guys from getting lucky. The incident on the stage was a distraction. A funny story for the mess hall. Nothing more, but the story would not stay in the mess hall. Within 48 hours, the video had been seen by the base commander, a full colonel who had spent 30 years in the army and had no patience for egos. He called Clara into his office, closed the door, and asked her one question: "Where did you learn that move?" Clara told him about her grandfather, about the judo classes, about the close combat instructor who had shown her the ankle pivot technique during a mandatory training session that most soldiers had slept through. The colonel nodded slowly. Then he asked if she would be willing to teach it to the rest of the battalion. Clara hesitated. She was not a trainer. She was an analyst. But the colonel did not ask twice. Within a week, Clara Vasquez was running voluntary hand-to-hand clinics in the evenings, teaching soldiers half her size how to drop opponents twice their weight using nothing but leverage and timing. The classes were always full, and every single class began with the same story: the day a Navy SEAL told 1,040 troops to remember who he was, and the woman who made sure they never forgot. 3 weeks after the incident, Chief Mitch Campbell found Clara outside the dining facility. He was not wearing his sunglasses. His face was pale, and there was a stiffness in the way he walked that suggested his back was still bothering him. Clara braced herself for an apology, or an excuse, or maybe even a threat. She had seen enough of male egos to know that humiliation often curdled into resentment. But Campbell surprised her. He stopped a few feet away, shoved his hands in his pockets, and said, "That was a good move." Clara waited. He shifted his weight. "I've been doing this for 14 years. I've trained with some of the best martial artists in the world. And I've never been dropped like that. Not once." He looked at the ground, then back at her. "Where did you come from?" Clara told him about the Bronx, about her grandfather, about the long nights studying jiu-jitsu videos on a cracked phone screen while her mother worked the night shift at a hospital. Campbell listened without interrupting. When she finished, he stuck out his hand. "I was an asshole," he said. "I called you sweetheart. I was showboating. And you made me pay for it." "That's fair." Clara shook his hand. His grip was careful, almost gentle. She did not say it's okay, because it was not okay. But she said, "Thank you," and that was enough. The two of them never became friends, exactly. Their worlds were too different. Campbell lived in the shadows of direct action missions, kicking down doors and hunting high-value targets. Clara lived in the cold logic of signals intelligence, predicting moves before they happened. But they developed a grudging mutual respect. Campbell started sending soldiers to her clinics. Clara started feeding Campbell's team better intelligence, cross-referencing their target packages with her drone feeds. Together, they saved lives. A patrol that would have walked into an ambush got redirected because Clara spotted the setup. A Taliban bomb maker was caught because Campbell's team acted on her coordinates. The incident on the stage faded from memory, replaced by something more important: results. The 1,040 troops who had watched a SEAL get dropped by a woman never forgot what they had seen, but they also never forgot what came after. A lesson about humility. A lesson about skill over swagger. And a lesson about how the best warriors are not the ones who talk the loudest, but the ones who listen the hardest. 6 months later, Clara Vasquez rotated back to the United States. She did not receive a medal for putting a SEAL on the ground. There was no Army Achievement Medal for embarrassing a superior in front of 1,000 troops, but she did receive something better: the quiet admiration of everyone who had been there. Soldiers she had never met would stop her in the PX or the motor pool and just say, "You're the one." She would nod and keep walking. She did not want to be a legend. She wanted to go home, see her mother, and sleep in a bed that did not smell like burn pits and body armor. When she finally landed at Fort Hood, Texas, her mother was waiting at the gate with a sign that said, "Welcome home, sweetheart." Clara laughed. For the first time in a year, she actually laughed. Her mother did not know about the SEAL, did not know about the video, did not know about the 1,040 troops who had watched her daughter do something impossible. All her mother knew was that Clara had come back in one piece. That was enough. Campbell, meanwhile, finished his own deployment and returned to the Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado, California. He never told his teammates about what had happened in Afghanistan. But he changed the way he trained. He stopped calling volunteers little lady. He stopped showboating. And he started teaching his students a new principle: never underestimate anyone. He would stand in front of a class of young SEAL candidates, hold up a rubber knife, and say, "The most dangerous person in this room might not be the biggest one. It might be the quiet one. The one who doesn't need to prove anything. Watch your ankles." He never mentioned Clara by name, but the story leaked out anyway. Within a year, the ankle pick heard round the FOB had become a legend in special operations circles. Told and retold in bars and barracks from Virginia Beach to San Diego, and every time the story was told, it ended the same way, with 1,040 troops learning that a title like Navy SEAL means nothing if you forget to respect the person standing in front of you. Clara Vasquez never sought fame, but she got something better. She got the truth. And the truth was simple. He started it, and in a split second, she ended it.